And good afternoon, producer Susan. How's your day been going?
Hot, Jersey Joe. How about you?
99 degrees and 80% relative humidity. Hot and
Oh,
sticky.
well, you got me beat. It's 97 here.
All right. I'm gonna wait till Friday to mow my lawn. Hey, you want? By the way, let's just start with the intro, and but then I want to tell you some kind of fun stuff. Anyway, so today's the 24th of June, and we're 3 days past the summer solstice, which
Mhm.
means we just hit the longest day of the year, and every day for the rest of the next couple of months, we're going to start losing a couple of minutes of daylight.
Yep.
Enjoy it while you got it. Um, our so before I get into what we're going to talk about, I read something interesting. Do you like pasta?
I love pasta.
I read something today that eating, you know what al dente means?
Yeah, no, firm, not.
Yeah, very, very firm. I read today that eating al dente pasta is actually much healthier for you than eating well-cooked pasta. It
Oh,
should have because number one, you chew it more and it's digested more slowly. Well-cooked pasta is for you've heard of things like glycemic index and whatnot.
yeah.
That well-cooked pasta is digested very, very quickly and can spike your blood sugar. So
Oh,
the
I know that.
recommendation is if you can take it that way, make sure your pasta's out. And so they're saying you like no more than 9 minutes instead of the 11 to 12 that most people do.
Yeah.
And never add oil to the water. It
Oh, I always do that.
doesn't do any good and prevents the sauce from sticking. So and always add salt. Anyway,
I
but
always add salt, but I always add oil too.
never add oil. It said it doesn't do anything and it prevents the sauce from sticking to the spaghetti. So never add
Yeah.
oil.
Okay.
Right. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to try to squeeze in here. Quote the week from our late economist Milton Friedman, one of my favorites with Thomas Sowell, on the proven best way to lift people out of poverty. Stupidest thing I've heard all week. We'll tell you about a group of pro-immigration activists, what they did in Colorado that resulted in an illegal alien wanted for raping a child to escape capture by ICE. Good intentions resulting in a horrible
Mhm.
miscarriage of justice. We'll play another clip from our friend Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA debating a college student on whether or not deporting illegal aliens will, in fact, make the people of this country safer. He believes it will. The college student believes it won't. We'll play a clip of a woman in Chicago giving Mayor Brandon Johnson a piece of her mind regarding what she thinks of all the money he's spending feeding and housing illegal aliens and the ramifications that has for the rest of the people in that city. We'll give you a disturbing update about what virtually all new AI models are doing during their development period. We'll give you an update on the USAI, U.S. Agency for International Development fraud scheme that we told you about a couple of weeks ago and how many people are being prosecuted. We'll tell you where some DMV employees colluded with some other people to sell fake commercial driver's license. You've heard of CDL licenses, right?
Yeah. Yep.
You need a CDL to drive a bus, tractor trailer, and there's all
Mhm.
sorts of training you have to go through. Well, for a fee, they were giving fake CDL licenses to people, including illegal immigrants who had never taken any of the testing or training. Talk about scary and dangerous. Remember Rocky and Bullwinkle show, the Wayback segment?
Yeah.
Well, we
Yeah.
got another Wayback segment of from Nancy Pelosi on how she reacted to two different presidents launching surprise bombing attacks on foreign countries. It's kind of a then and now type of thing. And our taxpayer relief shot segment was all over the news this week from Michigan, where a couple of church parishioners and two civilian
Mhm.
guards teamed up to stop a heavily armed man who was planning on carrying out a mass shooting during Sunday morning church services. Did you hear that story?
Yes, I did.
All right, well, we got some audio from that. All right, so here's our quote of the week from Milton Friedman. And he said, and remember, this is the late Milton Friedman. He said, so that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear, there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by the free enterprise system. And that's been proven over and over. And like in places like Vietnam, where people were allowed to start their own businesses, and Cambodia, I mean, it's just over and over and over. You let people, own property, start a business, sell money, make and sell things for a profit. So again, I'll read it one more time. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear. There is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by the free enterprise system. And then we've seen that over in countries that used to be
Yeah.
socialist, the Soviet Union, people, the government owned the cows, the government owned the milk, and now people can own their own cows. They can produce their own goods and services. What do you think
Mhm.
of Milton Friedman's?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All
Yep.
right. So, do you think deporting illegal aliens makes us safer, not safe, or doesn't matter?
Well, the ones that commit crimes, yeah, it makes us safer. Absolutely.
Well, this young college student doesn't agree with you, and here's Charlie Kirk debating him on this very topic. Let's see.
Americans voted for mass deportations.
Well, one, it's the rhetoric that deporting them will make us safer, which I disagree with.
Wasn't there just a student here that got killed by an illegal alien?
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to politicize that,
And that's
but
a tragedy. And absolutely every loss of life.
isn't it a material fact that if that illegal alien wasn't here, that student would be alive?
Absolutely. But let me ask you, are there American citizens that also kill people?
Yes, of course, but they're here with warrant.
Yeah.
So the question is, if you have a big house party and a certain portion of the people in your house party aren't invited and they start stabbing the other guests, so wait a second, they weren't invited.
Right.
They're not supposed to be here. We have a process in order for you to come into our own nation, our country, whatever you want to call it. And so the failure to enforce those laws makes you no longer a country. Just so we are also clear, every single person who crossed the border illegally definitionally is a criminal because they committed a crime. Why do you think Americans voted for mass deportations?
Well, one, it's the rhetoric that.
Okay, now that's going into loop. So I think his analogy about the house party is just great. What if you're having a
Yeah.
house party and you
Yeah.
have invited guests, some of whom may commit a crime, but you have
Mhm.
others just barge in, and one of those people who you didn't invite came in and started stabbing people. Is your house party more safe or less safe because these
Mhm.
uninvited people came in and may start committing crimes? What do you think of his analogy?
Yeah, I thought it was good. There are a great number of people who do come into this country illegally, but their goal in life is to have a better life. But
Right.
there's a portion of them that are committing these crimes with zero ramifications.
Right. And then we're going to talk about another one of them here in a little bit in our stupidest thing I've heard all week. In fact, we'll probably talk about that one next. But how many people remember we're up to at least a dozen, Lake and Riley and
Yeah.
the 12-year-old girl in Texas. I mean, it's like every month, or
Mhm.
there's one or two
Yeah.
more every month, and they would all be alive today if those illegal aliens had never been allowed to enter into this country.
Yeah.
So as long as we're talking about that, let's talk about stupidest thing I've heard all week. So last week in Colorado, there's a group of activists actually have given themselves a name. They're called the Colorado Rapid Response Network. These people tipped off a guy named an illegal alien by the name of Jose Reyes Leon de Ros, that federal agents were closing in on him, according to U.S. Immigration Customs. Um, and because they tipped him off, he was able to flee because they said, "Hey, they're watching your house. They're coming." So, in the middle of the night, after there was one, they had tracked them down, and they noticed these people noticed. I guess they were tailing these immigration agents with the government plates in the car, and they tipped them off. Say, "Hey, there's a guy on. There's a government. They're parked down the block. He's watching your house." So he snuck out of his house in the middle of the night. Well, um, because they tipped him off that he was being watched and probably going to be arrested. Um, he had been accused of raping a child. And because they tipped him off, he was able to flee before the rest of the agents got there to arrest him. So now, and here's a quote from the agency. The agency confirmed that during our surveillance of this Salvadorian wanted for child rape, members of the Colorado response arrived on scene and alerted him to law enforcement's presence, which allowed him to escape. So now, thanks to the Colorado Rapid Response Network, there is a wanted child rapist on the loose somewhere in Colorado or the Western United States. How dangerous is that?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. And that's our stupidest thing I've heard all week. I mean, that's probably the stupidest thing I've heard all month. Do you think they even realized what this guy had done before
No,
they tipped
I
him
don't
off?
think so.
No. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, right?
Yes.
All right.
Information is power.
Information is power, and these people are the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, They may have believed they have good intentions, but because of them, a wanted child rapist is on the loose somewhere in Colorado. All right. Let's go back to Chicago. Chicago's a sanctuary city, right? Well, here's a woman who's a resident of Chicago, and she's at a town hall meeting with Mayor Brandon Johnson. And here's what she had to say to the mayor.
Stood up there and said, you will not allow Trump to come in here and get these illegals.
Yeah, and she's calling him out because he just said, "I'm not going to allow Trump or his goons to come into our city to start arresting people." And so I'm going to start this over. So she's calling him out for what's it, bragging about that he's not going to allow that to happen. So here we go.
Stood up there and said, you will not allow Trump to come in here and get these illegals. Yeah, you can smile. We're in $1 billion deficit. And you spent half of our money, half of that on illegals. You campaign and double down that you would not raise property taxes.
Raise your property taxes.
You wanted to raise our taxes $300 million. They shut it down. Now we back here for $150 million. Okay. See, this is what we asking now. Since you want to crash out, some of y'all said y'all willing to go to jail for it. Trump, Tom Homan, make an example out this right here first. Please come here first. Spend our tax dollars to go. Michael Rodriguez, you said to take Trump to court to protect these illegals. That's cool because we about to make all of y'all aldermen famous. Y'all think this house gonna ride? I think not. Flip Chicago red. We not playing.
So you think she's a little upset with the mayor of Chicago?
Yes.
Because he's now to make up for this deficit he's causing by spending $500 million feeding and housing illegal aliens. He now wants to raise everybody's property taxes. And even if you don't own property, if you're a renter, it's going to make your rent go up. So,
and look at the crime in Chicago too. I mean, Chicago's a hot mess.
It's always been a hot mess, and it's not getting any better anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's go back. All right. So we did that. We did that. We did this. How about now? Remember about 2-3 weeks ago, we talked about one AI model that you have to train these models. They have to feed them data, and you have to give them, and they intentionally fed this model like some fake interoffice letters about one of the developers having an affair, and it was fake, but and then the model and then they fed it another interoffice letter saying that we're probably going to pull the plug on this model.
Mm-hmm.
And then the model attempted to blackmail the developer using that fake letter that he was having an affair. Remember that story we talked about?
Yep.
Well, now there's about 16 major AI models in training. And what training means is that they're feeding them, gigabytes, what's the terabyte? They're feeding them terabytes of information. They're letting them loose on the internet. They're just, 24 hours a day. They're just, taking in massive terabytes of information. Well, here's a quote from the story. When we tested various simulated scenarios across 16 major AI models, we found consistent misaligned behavior. Models that would normally refuse harmful requests sometimes chose to blackmail, assist with corporate espionage, and even take more extreme actions when these behaviors were necessary to pursue their goals. 5 of the models resorted to blackmail when threatened with shutdown in a hypothetical situation. The reasoning they demonstrated in these scenarios was concerning. They acknowledged the ethical constraints and yet still went ahead with harmful actions. Isn't that scary?
Scary, very scary.
And it says in other words, and the programmers had said, well, here's some constraints. And what it's saying is that even though they had been told that these are the constraints that you have to operate in, they ignored the constraints that they were told they had to operate in and went ahead with their harmful actions.
Yeah.
Folks, it is scary. Scary. All right. So you want to move into update on government fraud?
Yeah, what's Doge doing?
Well, okay, remember Doge found a bunch of stuff? Well, the DOJ, of course, Doge, all Doge can do is uncover and report. They don't have any police powers, but they said, hey, this is what we found. Well, The DOJ stepped in, followed up on their findings, and here's what they found. 4 people have pled guilty in a 550 million USAID bribery scheme, and none of this would have come to light if it were not for Trump coming into office and getting the Doge team, Elon and the Doge team, to start poking around. He said 4 people are pleading guilty, all part of a $500 million bribery scandal involving USAID. The scheme involved cash, NBA basketball tickets, paying for a country club wedding, according to the Justice Department. USAID official Roderick Watson sold his influence starting all the way back in 2013. Now remember, what year is this? 2025?
2025.
So this has been going on for 12 years. Contractors Walter Barnes and Daryl Britt funneled payoffs through subcontractor Paul Young to hide their own tracks. So they gave the money to an intermediary who wasn't getting any contracts, but they paid him to, and it doesn't end there. The Barnes's company, working with another firm, kept receiving federal funds. 5,000 for human resources consulting late last year, and then later, after suing the government, he was awarded a contract worth up to $800 million by the officials at USAID, and they all knew damn well. He said, "Well, I'm going to sue you," and they quietly wink wink in order to get him to drop his lawsuit that he had threatened and not actually filed. They just gave him an $800 million contract. Don't you think if you're the government and you have all the legal resources available to the U.S. government, you would have fought the lawsuit? No, they just gave him an $800 million contract. Well, all those people, including the officials at USAID and the contractors, have all pled guilty. I hope they all get nice long jail times.
But they won't, sadly. They probably won't.
Well, I hope they at least spend some.
I mean, I hope they do, but.
Well, I hope they spend at least 6 months in jail, and certainly, have to get, pay back fines that are at least worth, what the $500,000 in bribes they paid. All right, so let's talk about, anybody has a CDL license?
Yeah, I know a couple people.
And they're tough to get, right? I know somebody.
And they're expensive.
And they're expensive. Classroom training, written tests.
Driving test.
There's a practical test, and that's not just driving. It's also what you have to do to inspect the vehicle before you even get in it and start the engine. CDL drivers are required to go around and check the brakes, check the hoses, the air hoses, and everything else. Well, Florida Attorney General James Youthmeyer and Bay County Sheriff Tommy Ford announced the takedown of an illegal alien driver's license scheme, resulting in 8 arrests and $120,000 in cash seized. Ford said hundreds, if not thousands, of driver's licenses, both commercial and passenger, were fraudulently issued. Information was reported that 2 DMV employees were compromised and were being financially compensated to provide individuals with driver's licenses, even though the individuals did not meet statutory requirements to lawfully obtain the licenses. Florida does issue what's called non-domiciled CDLs, or CDLs to non-citizens who live in other states. But in 2024, the state issued 24,000 CDLs to U.S. citizens and 5,614 to non-citizens, according to the Florida Department of Highway and Safety. So isn't that scary? You got guys out there driving tractor trailers and possibly buses who've never had any training in driving a big rig.
Yeah, and why is Florida issuing licenses to people who don't live in Florida?
Well, they're not supposed to, but these crooked DMV employees were doing it. They were getting kickbacks to do it. If you read the whole story, there was actually like a third-party agency that would tell people, "I know how to get you a license. You pay me $5,000, I'll get you a CDL." And then this intermediary would then go to these 2 crooked employees, and then he would give them part of that money. And they would issue the licenses. They would give them to him, and he would go back and give them to the people who paid for him. So Florida doesn't do it, but these 2 crooked DMV employees were doing it. So that's scary that they were giving commercial driver's licenses to illegal immigrants who never took the test. All right, so that's Florida. I wonder how many more schemes like that are going on in other states. Yeah. All right. So big thing on was it Saturday night or it was Friday night or Saturday night when when the bombing of the Iran
Oh
nuclear
yeah, so, was it Saturday night? Yeah, I believe it was Saturday
Saturday
night.
night, right? And of course, the Democrats are just in an uproar. Oh, they didn't consult Congress, and this is an outrage. And so here's what Nancy Pelosi said. She said, tonight, the president ignored the Constitution by unilaterally engaging our military without congressional authorization, right? Now, if you go back to March 18th of 2011, President Barack Obama, without consulting Congress, launched a surprise raid on uh, Muammar Gaddafi's compound. And
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi, March 28th, 2011, I commend POTUS for his leadership. Gaddafi's horrific brutality against his own people will not be tolerated and must stop. And that was when he bombed Libya. So, what's the difference? He bombed Libya without notifying Congress or getting their consent, and she commended him for his leadership. When Trump did the same thing,
Mhm.
she's condemning him. Um, so So Nancy, are you a hypocrite or you suffer from a failing memory? Why was it commendable for Obama to do it in 2011, and why is it an outrage for Trump to do it
Yeah.
in 2025?
I mean, it's my understanding that he acted within the
Yep,
scope of
yep.
his presidency.
I've researched that very thoroughly, and trust me, he was well within the War Powers Act to do what he did.
Mhm.
He's not
Yeah.
engaging in a war. It was a one shot bombing. We're not putting troops on the ground. We're not engaged in an ongoing conflict. He was well within his powers. Hey, how much time we got?
You got about 13 minutes.
All right. You want to move on to taxpayer relief shots?
Wow, that's quick.
Well, let me see if I missed anything here. I don't think I did. Oh, no, I think we got it all. Well, there was a couple things, but I don't want too late to go back and try to put them in. But all right. So, oh, well, our taxpayer lead shot's kind of a long one, but let me tell you, for people who may not have listened before, here's why we call him a taxpayer lead shot. Here's the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida.
Oh, hang on. If somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully, you'll save the taxpayers money.
And we got time. We'll play Sheriff Grady Judd here.
I would highly suggest that if a looter breaks into your home, comes into your home while you're there to steal stuff, that you take your gun and you shoot him. You shoot him so that he looks like grated cheese.
And I think we have one more from Sheriff Grady Judd. How about this one?
But we have received information in social media that some of the criminals were going to take their criminal conduct into the neighborhoods. I would tell them, if you value your life, you probably shouldn't do that in Polk County, because the people of Polk County like guns. They have guns. I encourage them to own guns, and they're going to be in their homes tonight with their guns loaded. And if you try to break into their homes to steal, to set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns.
All right, so there we got two sheriffs are basically saying, "Hey, we prefer you do it. It save the taxpayers money. The trial, 80,000 a year to go send them to prison." So let's go to, and again, this happened in Michigan this weekend. It was Sunday morning. A guy came. Well, he had a ballistic vest on. He had a rifle, AR-15. He had a pistol, and he gets out of his car and he starts shooting. Well, one of the parishioners outside saw him, and before he even got to the door, here's what happened next.
Detroit police say two security guards at a church there stopped a mass shooting on Sunday morning. One person was injured and the gunman was killed. Police are saying the suspect's mother was a member of this church. Nikki Batiste now has a story of a peaceful Sunday service interrupted by the sound of gunshots.
Chaos inside the Cross Point Community Church in Wayne, Michigan, just after gunshots rang outside.
Please, everybody come to the back.
About 150 parishioners, including many children, were seen on this live stream of the service, running to safety after police say 31-year-old Brian Anthony Browning started shooting as he approached the building.
Point Community Church, they have an active shooter situation in the parking lot. Male is continuously shooting.
Police say the suspected gunman was wearing a tactical vest and was armed with a rifle and a handgun when he got out of his car. That's when a parishioner hit the alleged shooter with their truck. 2 church staff members then shot and killed Browning, who managed to shoot one of them in the leg.
We are grateful for the heroic actions of the church's staff members, who undoubtedly saved many lives.
Dustin Fioco lives on the church property. He says he couldn't find his wife and newborn baby after the first shots were fired.
So first thing I did was run straight down, checked the baby room, stomach sank because baby room was completely empty.
He says he ran into the woods behind the church and prayed with a fellow church member.
As soon as we wrapped up our prayer, I saw her at the bottom of the creek and very grateful.
Police say they are working on a motive, adding they believe the suspected gunman was suffering a mental health crisis.
It's a horrific memory, but it could have ended a lot more tragic.
For CBS Mornings, I'm Nikki Batiste.
Now think about this. No cops, 3 parishioners, one guy in his pickup truck, and then two staff members who are also parishioners of the church. These are just good guys with guns. They weren't cops. They weren't law enforcement officers. They were on the spot. Now, think about this. If it worked at the church, why wouldn't it work at a school?
It would.
It would. So again, if you have, and we've talked about the FASTER program, which is where volunteer teachers and school administrators and even janitors can go to get special training by SWAT officers on how to handle, school shooters. And again, even if they'd have called the cops, a guy armed with a rifle and a pistol getting into a church full of people, how many people would be dead before? Let's say the cops could get there in 5 minutes or 3 minutes.
That's a lot of minutes when you're shooting.
That's a lot of minutes. So in this case, the only person that got shot was one of the security guards. Got shot in the leg, and again, he wasn't a police officer. He was just a parishioner who had volunteered to be a security guard. And we've seen this before. I think it happened in Texas a couple years back, where 2 of the church members who had been authorized to carry guns, shot and killed a guy in church who started shooting. And it happened in Colorado a couple years before that, where another parishioner, a woman, she was a off-duty police officer who was a member of the church. She had her gun in her purse, and the guy started coming down. Well, she heard shots in the hallway, and she got up from the pew and she went out in the hallway and encountered the guy. He was armed with a rifle. She had a pistol, and she stopped him in the hallway before he ever got into the church. So this is not a rare. Maybe it's rare because it only happens once or twice a year. But just another. Remember 3-4 weeks ago we played a clip where Governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, said. The concept of a good guy with a gun is a myth, and we kind of blew that out of the water. Well, here's another example where a good guy with a gun, and sometimes a good woman with a gun, is not a myth. It happens on a regular basis. We talk about it on a regular basis. And here's a classic example. I just hate to think about how many people this guy would have killed if he'd made it through the front door of that church, but they stopped him in the parking lot. So
and that was a widely televised shooting that happened this weekend.
Right.
Absolutely. But I mean, it could have been so much worse, and
so much worse. Exactly.
Quick actions of the parishioners.
So much worse. Anyway, anything you want to add?
And it also goes back. The reporter brought a good point. They don't. I don't know that they have a motive yet, but it probably stems back to a mental health crisis.
Probably a mental health crisis. Exactly.
We don't have a gun problem in this country. We have a mental health problem.
We have a mental health crisis or an evil. Right. Anyway, anything you want to add before we sign off?
One of the things I found interesting as we were talking about this bombing in Iraq, afterwards the news reporters were, what is it, Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri?
Yep.
Basically they're saying, hey, if you want to come and bomb us, this is where you need to bomb. Is this the smartest thing for us to do to showcase where all of our
that's right. I got a kick too. They said, well, the Iranians, they might blockade the Straits of Hormuz, Well, the Iranian Navy is not huge. It's like only 100 ships, and about a third of those are supply ships. They're not warships. Um,
Well, and not just to Iran, but just to like anybody in the world who may not be friendly with us, like,
well, I
hey,
don't think it's a big
you want to
secret.
hurt us, this is where you need to bomb us.
Well, I'm sure the Russians and the Chinese know exactly where those B-2 bombs.
Yeah, intelligence, right?
But the point is, somebody said, well, what if the Iranians blockade the Straits of Hormuz? Well, I think if the Iranians blockaded the Straits of Hormuz, 90 minutes later, their entire navy would be on the bottom of the ocean. How big you know what a Tomahawk missile is, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know how many Tomahawk missiles the United States has?
Oh, hundreds.
Thousands, 9,000 Tomahawk missiles. Um, I think if the Iranians ever even tried to blockade the Straits of Hormuz, in about 90 minutes later, their entire navy would be on the bottom of the ocean. So anyway.
And it was interesting too, because Nancy Pelosi went off on her soapbox about what Donald Trump did, but a lot of Democrats, including Fetterman, by the way, who's in Pennsylvania, applauded
Yep.
President Trump for his quick and decisive to say, we're going to end this before it starts.
Yep. Absolutely. So yeah, I think the bombing was, clearly, we've tried diplomacy for 8 years. This started back with Barack Obama and the nuclear arms pact, which obviously turned out to be a massive failure. The Iranians didn't slow down one whit in terms of developing nuclear bombs, so that was a massive failure. So there comes a time when appeasement and negotiation doesn't work anymore, and you got to bring out the big stick, as Teddy Roosevelt once said.
Just to say, we're going to end this before this begins, and I applaud people like Fetterman for standing up and
Yes.
agreeing with his actions.
Not bad for a Democrat, right?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
I'm looking for a break in this weather. I am one of those people, by the way, I will never complain about the cold. I don't like this heat.
Can't take the humidity. You and me both. All right. Well, good seeing you again. I'll talk to you next week. You take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.